I was standing in the hallway of my son's house at 9:47 a.m. on a Saturday morning that would destroy everything I thought I knew about love. I had arrived early to begin my weekly ritual of cleaning his sprawling McMansion from top to bottom, something I had been doing every Saturday for 3 years. 12 hours of backbreaking labor that I called love and they called convenience. My name is Linda, and I spent 3 years of my life working as an unpaid maid in my own son's house. I'm 78 years old now, and I'm finally ready to tell you how it happened. If you've ever wondered how far someone can push you before you finally push back, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, then you need to hear this story. Because sometimes the worst betrayal comes from the people who are supposed to love you most. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It really encourages me to keep sharing these incredible stories with you all. Kindly let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing where my sweethearts are tuning in. Are you watching from your kitchen like me? Your bedroom? Your office during lunch break? Tell me, sweetheart. I stood frozen just inside the front door, my worn canvas bag full of cleaning supplies clutched against my chest like armor as my son Jason's voice drifted down from the master bedroom with crystal-clear cruelty. Mom's just a free maid who's too stupid to realize we're using her. Those words hit me like physical blows, each syllable carving deeper into my chest. This wasn't the voice of the little boy I had raised with such love and sacrifice. This wasn't the teenager I had worked double shifts to support through high school and college. This was the voice of a man who saw his mother's love as stupidity, my sacrifice as convenience, my devotion as something to mock behind closed doors. Tell me in the comments right now, have you ever felt taken for granted by your own family? Because my journey from doormat to empowered woman will show you that it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve. You need to understand something about me. I wasn't always a woman who accepted disrespect. Before that devastating Saturday morning changed everything, I was someone completely different. I was 58 years old at the time. With graying hair I kept neatly pulled back in a practical bun that spoke of decades spent caring for others. My hands told stories. Hands that had started IVs in darkened hospital rooms at 3 a.m. Hands that had comforted dying patients in their final moments. Hands that had worked double shifts to pay for my son's college education. For 35 years, I had worked as a registered nurse at Metropolitan General Hospital. I wasn't just any nurse. I was a charge nurse, the person other nurses looked to when everything went wrong. When the emergency department was overflowing and chaos threatened to consume the night shift, I was the steady voice that brought order. When new graduates were overwhelmed and scared, I was the mentor who guided them through their first life and death decisions. When difficult doctors threw tantrums, I was the professional who stood my ground and advocated for my patients. I had been someone who mattered, someone whose opinion carried weight, someone whose presence commanded respect. Doctors sought my clinical judgment on complex cases. Families trusted me with their most vulnerable moments, knowing I would fight for their loved ones as fiercely as if they were my own. Colleagues sought my advice on everything from medical procedures to personal problems because they knew I had the wisdom that comes from 3 decades of healing others. But that was before my world crumbled 3 years earlier, when my husband Carlos died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving me alone in our small apartment with nothing but memories and an overwhelming need to feel useful again. Carlos hadn't just been my husband. He had been my anchor, my best friend, my partner in every sense of the word for 32 years. We had met when I was 26, a newly graduated nurse working my first job in cardiac care, and Carlos was 28, a maintenance supervisor at the same hospital. Our love story wasn't the stuff of romance novels. It was better. It was real, built on mutual respect, shared dreams, and the kind of deep partnership that grows stronger with each passing year. Carlos had seen my strength and intelligence and had never once asked me to diminish myself for his comfort or ego. When I wanted to go back to school for my nursing management degree, Carlos had taken a second job to help pay tuition without a single complaint. When I worked those brutal overnight shifts, He would leave little handwritten notes in my lunch bag, messages of love and encouragement that I would find during my darkest moments. When I came home exhausted from particularly difficult days, watching patients suffer or lose their battles, Carlos would draw me a bath and listen to me decompress, without trying to fix everything or tell me how to feel. Together, we had raised one child, our son Jason, pouring all our love and energy into making sure he had every opportunity we never had growing up. I worked double shifts to pay for Jason's college education, selling my mother's precious jewelry to help with his wedding, because we wanted him to start his married life without debt. And when Carlos died suddenly, leaving me drowning in grief and loneliness, I threw myself into being the perfect grandmother to Jason's two children, 6-year-old Emma and 4-year-old Noah. But here's what I couldn't see at the time. What grief had blinded me to completely, my desperate need to feel useful again, had made me vulnerable in ways I couldn't recognize. After 32 years of being half of a loving partnership, I suddenly didn't know how to be whole by myself. After decades of being valued for my professional expertise and respected for my clinical judgment, retirement left me feeling useless and invisible. After a lifetime of being Carlos's beloved wife and equal partner, I was desperate to feel needed and loved by anyone who would accept my devotion. First call to action. If you can already see where this is heading and you're feeling concerned for me, hit that like button right now. Sometimes we all need someone to care about our well-being when we can't see ourselves clearly. The arrangement that would define the next 3 years of my life started with such innocent intentions, the way most toxic situations do, with genuine need and a mother's natural desire to help. About 6 months after Carlos died, when I was still raw with grief and struggling to find any purpose in my suddenly empty days, I had visited Jason's house for what I hoped would be a warm Sunday dinner with my only remaining family. It was a beautiful autumn evening, and I had been looking forward to that visit all week like a lifeline. Since Carlos's death, Sundays had become the loneliest day of the week, the day when couples did things together, when families gathered around dinner tables, when the silence in my apartment became so deafening I could barely breathe. I had dressed carefully for dinner, wearing the blue dress Carlos had always loved, and I brought homemade flan that had been his favorite dessert, hoping to create some warmth and connection in a world that felt impossibly cold. But when I arrived at Jason's house, I immediately noticed how overwhelmed Ashley seemed, standing in her beautiful kitchen like a woman drowning in her own life. The granite countertops were buried under a week's worth of dishes. Toys were scattered throughout the expensive living spaces like debris from an explosion. Laundry was piled on furniture that cost more than I spent on groceries in 6 months. The house looked like a tornado had swept through it, and Ashley was standing in the middle of it all, looking frazzled and on the verge of tears. "I'm so sorry about the mess," Ashley had said, gesturing helplessly at the chaos surrounding us. "I've been working 60-hour weeks trying to close this huge commercial deal, and Jason's been traveling for work constantly, and the kids have been sick, and I can't keep up with everything anymore." Looking at that overwhelming scene, I saw something achingly familiar. The kind of crisis situation I had managed countless times as a nurse, when multiple patients needed attention simultaneously, when families were falling apart, when systems were breaking down, and someone needed to step in and make things work again. My instincts, honed by 3 decades of caring for people in distress, kicked in immediately. Being a mother, being a nurse, being someone who had spent my entire life fixing problems and caring for people who needed help, I did what felt as natural as breathing. I rolled up my sleeves and started helping. I washed the mountain of dishes while Ashley got the children ready for dinner. I folded the expensive laundry while Jason set the table with their designer place settings. I organized the scattered toys while Ashley touched up her makeup and tried to look like she had everything under control. "Linda, you don't have to do this," Jason had said, though he made absolutely no move to stop me and seemed genuinely relieved that someone else was handling the overwhelming mess. "I want to help," I replied, and I meant every word. After a lifetime of caring for others, sitting alone in my apartment felt like slowly dying. Besides, what else am I going to do with my time? Looking back now, I can see that this was the moment I made my first crucial mistake. I presented my time as worthless, my presence as having no purpose beyond serving others. I taught them in that single moment that my only value was in what I could do for them, not in who I was as a person, not in the wisdom I'd gained or the love I could offer as their mother and grandmother. What started as one evening of occasional help gradually became a weekly commitment that consumed my life. The next week, Ashley called me on Friday evening, her voice sweet and apologetic in a way that should have set off warning bells but instead made me feel needed. "Linda, I hate to ask, but we're having Jason's boss over for dinner tomorrow night, and the house is such a disaster. Would you mind terribly coming by for just a few hours to help me get organized? I know it's a lot to ask." Of course I said yes. What mother wouldn't want to help her son make a good impression on his boss? What grandmother wouldn't want to ensure her precious grandchildren lived in a clean, organized home? I told myself I was being helpful, that I was contributing something valuable to my family's success and happiness. Every Saturday morning, I would wake up at 5 a.m. with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since retiring from nursing. I would pack my cleaning supplies in the same worn canvas bag I'd carried through hospital corridors for decades, and make the 45-minute drive from my modest apartment to their sprawling suburban neighborhood. I would arrive at 6 in the morning, letting myself in with the spare key they'd given me, and work until 6 at night, transforming their house from the chaos of a busy family into something that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The house was enormous. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, a formal dining room, living room, family room, home office, and finished basement. It was the kind of house I had dreamed of as a child growing up in poverty, but never imagined I'd be cleaning as a grown woman with a college degree and 3 decades of professional experience. I would scrub bathrooms until they sparkled like something from a luxury hotel, vacuum every carpet until the pile stood perfectly straight, mop every floor until it gleamed, dust every surface until not a speck remained, organize every closet with military precision, wash and fold mountains of designer laundry, clean out the refrigerator, and restock it with organized perfection, and prepare elaborate meals for the coming week. I would get down on my hands and knees to clean baseboards with a toothbrush, climb on step stools to dust ceiling fans, and somehow always find energy to play with Emma and Noah when they wanted their grandmother's attention. Still, I told myself I was blessed to be able to help my family, to feel needed again after feeling so lost without Carlos. I convinced myself that this was what love looked like, what family meant, what a devoted mother and grandmother should do. Tell me honestly in the comments, do you think I was being too generous? Or is this what family is supposed to do for each other? Because looking back, I can see warning signs I completely missed at the time. My Saturdays became sacred to me, but for all the wrong reasons. I would wake up at 5 in the morning with the kind of anticipation other people reserve for vacations or celebrations, pack my cleaning supplies in the same worn canvas bag I'd carried as a nurse, and make the drive through the quiet suburban streets. I knew every turn, every traffic light, every landmark along the way. This routine gave me purpose when everything else in my life felt uncertain and meaningless. At Jason's house, I had developed my own systematic approach, working with the quiet efficiency of someone who had spent decades managing crisis situations in hospital settings. I would let myself in with the spare key they'd given me, careful not to wake the family who were still sleeping peacefully in their expensive beds. I would start with the kitchen, clearing the dishes from Friday night's dinner that would inevitably be left in the sink as evidence of their comfortable assumption that someone else would handle the cleanup. Then, I would move methodically through each room, working with the precision I had once used to manage patient care. First the living areas, then the bedrooms, then the bathrooms, saving the most challenging tasks for when I had the most energy. Every surface would be scrubbed, every item would be organized, every corner would be addressed, until the house transformed from lived-in chaos to pristine perfection. The hardest part wasn't the physical work. I was strong and had always been a hard worker. The hardest part was the crushing loneliness that would settle over me as I worked in silence. While I cleaned, I would imagine Carlos there with me, making jokes about how messy our son had become, helping me reach the high shelves I struggled with, sitting with me during my brief breaks to eat the simple sandwich I'd packed. But Carlos wasn't there, and I was left alone with my thoughts and the sound of my own breathing in rooms that felt as empty as my heart. Jason would usually emerge around 10 in the morning, hair messy from sleep, wearing expensive silk pajamas that cost more than I spent on clothes in an entire month. He would grunt a greeting that barely qualified as acknowledgement, pour himself coffee from the pot I had made hours earlier, and disappear into his home office to work on weekend projects that apparently couldn't wait until Monday. Sometimes he would bring me a cup of coffee, but more often he would simply step around me as I cleaned, as if I were part of the furniture rather than his mother. Ashley would appear later, usually around noon, perfectly dressed even on weekends with her hair and makeup flawless if she was heading to a photo shoot rather than spending a casual day at home. She would survey my work with the critical eye of a supervisor, occasionally commenting on missed spots or suggesting different ways to organize things. "Linda, could you make sure to use the wood cleaner on the dining room table this time?" she would say, her voice carrying that particular tone people use when they're trying to sound sweet but are actually being condescending. The children, Emma and Noah, were the only bright spots in those long, exhausting days. They would follow me around like devoted puppies, chattering about school and friends, helping me sort laundry, and sometimes making the work take twice as long with their enthusiastic but inefficient assistance. I didn't mind. I would tell them stories about their father when he was little, teach them simple tasks that made them feel important, and sneak them extra snacks when their parents weren't looking. "Abuela Linda, why do you always come to clean our house?" Emma asked me one day, using the Spanish grandmother name I had taught her, her innocent 6-year-old eyes wide with genuine curiosity. "Because I love you and I want to help," I replied, though even as I said the words, something deep in my chest felt hollow and false. The arrangement seemed perfect on the surface, a win-win situation that benefited everyone involved. Jason and Ashley got their enormous house professionally cleaned every week without paying a single cent. Linda got to feel useful and stay close to her grandchildren. Everyone was happy, or so I desperately told myself, ignoring the growing unease in my stomach. But my friends saw what I couldn't, or wouldn't, see. Maria, my closest friend from my nursing days, would shake her head with increasing concern whenever I mentioned my Saturday routine. "Mija, you're working yourself to death," she would say, her voice heavy with worry. "When do you rest? When do you do something for yourself? When do you live your own life?" "I'm helping my family," I would reply defensively, hating the way her questions made me feel selfish for wanting anything beyond the privilege of serving others. After Carlos died, this gives me purpose. It makes me feel needed again. "But what about your own life, your own home, your own needs?" Maria would press gently. "When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to? When's the last time you put yourself first?" I couldn't answer that question because I genuinely couldn't remember. Every decision I made revolved around others. My patients when I was working, Carlos when he was alive, and now Jason's family. The idea of doing something purely for myself felt selfish, foreign, almost impossible to imagine. I had been trained my entire life to put others first, and I didn't know how to be any other way. After almost 2 years of this exhausting routine, I began to notice things that made me uncomfortable, though I tried desperately to push these feelings away. The first sign was how casually Jason and Ashley talked about money in front of me. I would overhear conversations about expensive purchases, new furniture that cost more than I made in a year of nursing, elaborate vacation plans to exotic destinations, Ashley's monthly spa treatments that cost more than my grocery budget, Jason's exclusive golf club membership that required a waiting list and connections. They seemed to have plenty of money for luxuries and entertainment, but whenever I gently suggested they might want to hire professional help, so I could visit more casually as a grandmother rather than as unpaid labor, they would deflect with practiced ease. "Mom, we love having you here," Jason would say with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "You do such a better job than any service would. You actually care about getting everything perfect." Besides, Ashley would add with her own fake smile, "Why would we pay strangers when we have a family who cares? You're so much better than any professional cleaning service." I wanted desperately to believe this was about love and family bonds, but I couldn't shake the growing feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with this arrangement. I began to pay closer attention to their conversations, their attitudes, and the way they treated my presence in their home like a burden rather than a gift. If you're feeling frustrated on my behalf right now, hit that subscribe button because this story is about to get much more intense. And let me know in the comments, have you ever been in a situation where you felt like your kindness was being taken advantage of? The pattern continued and escalated in ways that, looking back, I should have recognized immediately as deliberate manipulation. Ashley would leave dishes in the sink all week, claiming she was too busy to load the dishwasher that sat empty just inches away. Jason would drop his expensive clothes wherever he took them off, leaving $1,000 suits crumpled on the floor like they were disposable rags. The children's toys would be scattered throughout the entire house, not just in their designated playrooms, because everyone knew Abuela Linda would put everything back in its proper place. I tried to set some gentle boundaries, approaching the subject as carefully as I would have approached a difficult patient's family. "Maybe we could establish some basic rules," I suggested one Saturday, my voice tentative and apologetic. "Like putting dishes in the dishwasher when you're finished eating, or keeping toys in the playroom instead of throughout the house." Ashley's response was swift and sharp, like a slap across my face. "Linda, we work full-time jobs. We're doing our best to balance everything with our demanding careers. I thought you wanted to help your family." The implication was crystal clear. If I wanted to help, I would do it without complaints or conditions. Any suggestion that they modify their behavior was seen as me being difficult, ungrateful for the privilege of serving them, selfish for expecting basic consideration. My own apartment began to suffer dramatically. I was so exhausted after my 12-hour Saturdays that I would come home and collapse, too drained to maintain my own living space. My own cleaning went undone for weeks at a time. My own laundry piled up in mountains. My own life was put on hold so I could maintain their picture-perfect existence. I stopped accepting invitations from friends because I was too tired to socialize. I stopped pursuing the hobbies I had planned to take up after retirement. My whole existence revolved around making their lives easier while my own life withered away. The situation came to a devastating head during one of the most difficult periods of my life. I had been feeling unwell for several days, a persistent cough that wouldn't go away, body aches that made every movement painful, and fatigue that went far beyond my usual exhaustion. When I woke up Friday morning with a fever and chills, I knew I was getting seriously sick. As a nurse with decades of experience, I understood the importance of rest when fighting an illness, but I also knew that Jason and Ashley were hosting a Sunday brunch for Ashley's parents, an event that had been planned for months. I called Jason Friday afternoon, my voice hoarse from coughing and barely above a whisper. "Mijo, I think I'm coming down with something pretty bad. I might need to skip tomorrow so I can rest and get better before this gets worse." There was a pause on the other end of the line that stretched so long I wondered if the call had been dropped. When Jason finally spoke, his voice carried an edge of irritation that cut through my feverish haze. "Mom, we have people coming over Sunday. Ashley's parents are finally visiting from out of state, and you know how important it is that the house looks absolutely perfect. Ashley's been stressed about this for weeks." "I understand how important this is," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady as another coughing fit threatened. "But I'm really not feeling well. Maybe Ashley could do some light cleaning, or you could hire someone just for this weekend. I could even help you find a service." "Mom," Jason interrupted, his tone becoming more irritated, You know, Ashley's been working crazy hours this week trying to prepare for her parents' not visit. She's already stressed to the breaking point, and hiring someone last minute would cost a fortune. Probably $500 or more. Can't you just push through it? You've worked while sick before when you were nursing. This is important to us. I had worked while sick before, countless times as a nurse. I had dragged myself to the hospital while fighting my own illnesses because patients' lives depended on it. But this was different. This was my family asking me to sacrifice my health for their convenience, their image, their comfort, their social standing. I'll see how I feel in the morning, I said weakly, but I already knew what I would do. I would drag myself to their house because the alternative was letting them down, and I had never been able to live with disappointing people I loved, even when they clearly didn't return that consideration. Saturday morning, I felt worse than I had in years. My fever had climbed higher, my cough was deeper and more painful, and every muscle in my body ached like I'd been beaten. I should have been in bed with hot tea and rest, but instead I packed my cleaning supplies with shaking hands and made the drive to Jason's house, stopping twice to rest because I felt dizzy and weak. The house was in its usual state of chaos, but with the added mess of a week's worth of deliberate neglect. It seemed like Ashley had made extra messes, knowing I would be there to clean them up. Clothes scattered everywhere, dishes covering every available surface, and the bathrooms looking like they hadn't been touched in weeks. I worked slowly, taking frequent breaks to cough and rest, but I pushed through with the same determination I had once used to get through difficult shifts at the hospital. I cleaned every room, scrubbed every surface, and organized every closet. By the time I finished, I was running a dangerously high fever and could barely stand, but the house was absolutely perfect. Jason barely acknowledged my work or my obvious illness. "Thanks, Mom," he said distractedly, focused on setting up his new expensive sound system for the brunch. Ashley was at the salon getting her hair done, preparing for her parents' visit, while I dragged myself home to collapse in my own bed. The next day, I was too sick to get out of bed. I spent the day sleeping fitfully, my fever breaking and returning in waves, my body fighting whatever illness I had made worse by working when I should have been resting. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a notification from Ashley's Instagram account. Even in my feverish state, I couldn't resist looking. She had posted a series of photos from the brunch, showing their beautiful home, their perfect family, their successful life. The captions were full of gratitude and love, but there was no mention of me, no acknowledgement of the sacrifice I had made while sick to make this perfection possible. In one photo, Ashley's mother was commenting on how beautiful the house was, how well Ashley maintained it, and how impressed she was with her daughter's homemaking skills. Ashley had responded with a laughing emoji and a comment about how hard it was to keep up with everything while working full-time. I stared at my phone through feverish eyes, burning with illness and something else, a growing awareness that I had become invisible in my own family's story. I was the ghost who made their life possible, but I didn't exist in their narrative of success and happiness. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It really encourages me to keep sharing these incredible stories with you all. Kindly let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing where my sweethearts are tuning in. Are you watching from your kitchen like me? Your bedroom? Your office during lunch break? Tell me, sweetheart. The moment that shattered everything came 3 weeks later, on my 59th birthday. A day that should have been about celebration, but instead became about devastating revelation. I had been looking forward to this day for weeks, dropping increasingly obvious hints to Jason about maybe spending it together as a family. Nothing elaborate, maybe dinner at a nice restaurant, or even just a quiet meal at home with the grandchildren. After Carlos died, birthdays had become particularly difficult for me, marking another year of life without my partner. And I hoped desperately that this year might be different. The week before my birthday, I had been more direct than usual, my hope overriding my usual reluctance to ask for attention. "My birthday is next Saturday," I mentioned while folding Jason's expensive laundry. "I was thinking maybe we could do something together." I could cook dinner for everyone, or we could go out somewhere nice. It's been so long since we've just spent time together as a family. "Oh, that sounds great, Mom," Jason had replied, but he was looking at his phone while he spoke, his attention clearly elsewhere. "Let me check with Ashley about our schedule. We might have something going on." Ashley, who was nearby organizing her collection of designer shoes, looked up with a bright smile that seemed genuine. "We'll definitely celebrate you, Linda. You absolutely deserve it after everything you do for us." I felt a warmth in my chest that I hadn't experienced in months. They were going to celebrate my birthday. I would finally feel like more than just the cleaning lady. I would feel like family, like someone who's. The week passed slowly as I planned what I would wear, what restaurant I might suggest, how wonderful it would be to have a whole day focused on spending time together rather than working. I even bought a new dress, something I hadn't done in years, imagining how nice it would look in the family photos we might take, how happy I would look surrounded by the people I loved most. Saturday morning arrived. My birthday morning. I woke up with anticipation coursing through my veins, expecting a call from Jason to confirm our plans. I waited by the phone, doing small tasks around my apartment, checking my phone every few minutes like a teenager waiting for a call from a crush. By noon, I hadn't heard anything, so I called Jason with growing concern. The phone rang several times before going to voicemail. I tried Ashley's number with the same result. Growing worried that something might have happened, I decided to drive to their house. Maybe they were planning a surprise party, or maybe there was an emergency and they needed my help. When I arrived at Jason's house, I noticed immediately that their cars weren't in the driveway. The house looked dark and empty. I used my key to enter, thinking maybe they had gone out briefly and would be back soon. The house was completely empty, but it was also unusually clean. Much cleaner than it typically was before my weekly arrival. Confused and growing more hurt by the minute, I sat in their pristine living room and opened my phone to check if I had missed any messages. What I found instead broke my heart so completely I actually gasped out loud. Ashley had posted a series of Instagram stories from what looked like a luxury resort. The first photo showed her and Jason in a beautiful hotel lobby, cocktails in hand with the caption, "Surprise weekend getaway." The next photo showed them by a stunning pool, then in a fancy restaurant, then in what was clearly an expensive hotel room with a view of the ocean. I scrolled through the photos with shaking hands, each one a knife to my heart. They had planned this trip weeks in advance. They had made reservations, packed bags, arranged childcare for Emma and Noah, and left town, all without a single word to me about my birthday, as if it didn't exist. As if I didn't exist. The worst part was reading the comments. Ashley's friends were asking about the spontaneous trip, and Ashley had responded, "Sometimes you just need to get away and focus on each other. No kids, no responsibilities, just us. Blessed couples getaway. No responsibilities." I sat in their empty house on my birthday, reading about how spending time with family was considered a burden to be escaped from. The woman who cleaned their house for free, who had worked while sick to make their social events perfect, who had sacrificed her own life to maintain theirs, was lumped in with responsibilities to be avoided. I called Maria with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, trying to keep my voice steady but failing completely. "Where are you?" Maria asked immediately, hearing the devastation in my voice. "I thought you were celebrating with Jason today." "They forgot," I said simply, and saying it out loud made it real in a way that hurt worse than anything I had experienced since Carlos died. "They went away for the weekend. I'm sitting in their house right now, and they're at some resort posting pictures on social media." "They forgot your birthday? How do you forget your mother's birthday?" "I don't know," I whispered, my voice breaking. "They went away for the weekend. I'm sitting in their house right now, and they're at some resort posting pictures about having no responsibilities." The house was cleaner than usual because they had prepared for their trip. They had probably done a quick cleanup so they wouldn't come home to a mess, which meant they were perfectly capable of maintaining their own home when it mattered to them. They just chose not to when I was available to do it instead. As I sat there in that beautiful, empty house, surrounded by the life I had helped create but wasn't included in, I felt the full weight of my invisibility crushing down on me. I wasn't just being taken for granted, I was being erased from their lives, except when they needed my labor. If you're feeling angry on my behalf right now, you need to subscribe to see how I handled this ultimate betrayal. And let me know in the comments, what would you do if your own family forgot your birthday to go on vacation? The weeks following my forgotten birthday were different in ways I couldn't quite articulate. I continued my Saturday routine, but something fundamental had shifted inside me. The hurt had crystallized into a kind of clarity I had never experienced before. I began to see my situation not through the lens of love and family obligation, but through the eyes of someone who had spent decades advocating for vulnerable patients who couldn't advocate for themselves. If one of my patients had told me this story, a widow working 12-hour days for free while her family lived in luxury and forgot her birthday, I would have been outraged. I would have helped that patient see the manipulation, the exploitation, the complete lack of respect. But it's so much harder to see clearly when you're living inside the situation, when your heart is clouded by love and hope and desperate need. I started paying attention to details I had previously ignored or explained away. I noticed how Jason and Ashley would suddenly become very busy with phone calls or errands whenever I arrived, avoiding the small talk that might make me feel like a welcome guest rather than hired help. I noticed how they would leave bigger messes on weeks when they had social events coming up, as if they were saving their energy for people who actually mattered to them. Most painfully, I noticed how they talked about me to others when they thought I couldn't hear. One Saturday, I overheard Ashley on the phone with a friend, describing her busy schedule with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. "I literally don't know how I'd manage everything without Jason's mom," Ashley said, and I froze in the hallway outside the kitchen. "She's here every weekend, handling all the cleaning. It's like having a housekeeper, but better because she actually cares about doing it right. Like having a housekeeper, but better. Better because I worked for free. Better because I could be taken for granted without the messy complications of employee rights or professional boundaries. Better because I was family, which meant I would never quit, no matter how badly they treated me." The breaking point was approaching, though I didn't know it yet. I was developing a new awareness, a growing sense that something had to change, but I hadn't yet found the courage to act on it. That courage would come soon, in the form of a conversation I was never meant to hear. It was a Saturday morning in late spring, and I had arrived at Jason's house earlier than usual. I had been unable to sleep, my mind churning with thoughts about my birthday, about the years of service, about the growing feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with my relationship with my son and daughter-in-law. As I let myself into the house with my spare key, I could hear voices coming from upstairs. Jason and Ashley were awake, talking in their bedroom. I normally would have started my work immediately, announcing my presence with the sound of running water or vacuum cleaners. But something in the tone of their conversation made me pause. They were discussing something serious, and I could hear my own name being mentioned. I found myself frozen at the bottom of the stairs, my cleaning supplies clutched in my hands, listening to a conversation that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. What I was about to hear would shatter my world, but it would also set me free. Jason's voice drifted down the stairs with casual cruelty. "She's getting more clingy lately. Always hinting about spending more time together, wanting to be included in things. It's getting annoying." Ashley's response was sharp and clear. "I know. It's getting really annoying. At least we're saving $800 a month on cleaning services. She's like having a professional housekeeper, except better because she actually cares about doing it right." My heart began to pound so hard I was sure they would hear it upstairs. They were talking about me, about money, about the work I did for them out of love. I knew I should announce my presence, go upstairs and pretend I hadn't heard anything, but I couldn't move. Something told me I needed to hear this conversation, needed to know the truth about what they really thought of me. "The best part," Jason continued, and I could hear the cruel smile in his voice, "is that she thinks we're being grateful. She's too stupid to realize we're using her." The words hit me like a physical blow that knocked the breath from my lungs. Too stupid to realize we're using her. My own son, the child I had raised with such love and sacrifice, the teenager I had worked double shifts to support, was calling me stupid for loving him. Was laughing about exploiting my grief and loneliness. Ashley's laughter joined Jason's, high and sharp and utterly without compassion. "What are we going to do when she gets too old to clean properly?" Ashley asked with the casual tone of someone discussing replacing an old appliance. "Simple," Jason replied without hesitation. "We'll hire someone professional and tell her we don't need her help anymore. She'll probably be relieved to have more free time. Problem solved." More laughter, more casual cruelty. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, my cleaning supplies clutched in my shaking hands, as the people I loved most in the world revealed exactly what they thought of my sacrifice. I was nothing more than free labor to them, a convenience they would discard when I was no longer useful. I had found my breaking point. The question now was, what was I going to do about it? If you need to see how I handled this devastating betrayal, make sure you're subscribed with notifications, because what I did next will shock you. And tell me in the comments, if you overheard your own family talking about you this way, what would your first move be? I stood at the bottom of those stairs for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. In that brief moment, 3 years of suppressed doubts, ignored red flags, and rationalized disrespect crashed over me like a tidal wave. Every conversation I had dismissed, every slight I had excused, every moment I had felt invisible, suddenly made perfect, devastating sense. I quietly set down my cleaning supplies and walked back to my car. For the first time in 3 years, I was leaving their house without completing my work. For the first time since Carlos died, I was putting my own feelings first. I drove straight to Maria's house, where my friend took one look at my face and immediately put on a pot of coffee. I told her everything, the overheard conversation, the years of exploitation, the devastating realization that I had been living in a fantasy. "What are you going to do?" Maria asked gently. "I'm going to treat this like the professional situation it apparently is," I said with a firmness that surprised us both. "They want to pretend I'm just a free cleaning service? Fine, I'll show them exactly what that service is worth." I spent the next week researching professional cleaning services, calculating market rates, and documenting everything I had provided. When I returned the following Saturday, I arrived in a business suit carrying a briefcase containing a detailed invoice for 3 years of services, $67,200. The confrontation was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I watched my son's face turn pale as I laid out the documentation, the photographs, the evidence of their exploitation. When Ashley tried to manipulate me, I stood firm. When Jason tried to guilt me, I remained professional. "Choose one," I told them calmly. "If I'm family, treat me with respect, include me in your lives, remember my birthday. If I'm an employee, pay me professional rates. What you can't do is pretend I'm family when it comes to payment, while treating me like hired help when it comes to respect." They chose to hire a professional service, and I walked away with my dignity intact for the first time in 3 years. 6 months later, Jason called to apologize. The real cleaning bills, the child care costs, and the reality of managing their own lives had taught them exactly what my stupidity was worth. It took time, but we rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect rather than exploitation. Today, at 78, I can tell you that standing up for yourself is never too late. I never cleaned another house for free, but I did learn to clean house in a different way, clearing out relationships that didn't serve me and polishing my self-respect until it shined. The most important lesson I learned? Love should never require you to sacrifice your dignity. Real family respects your boundaries, and sometimes the people who call you stupid are just angry that you finally got smart. What's the most important lesson you're taking away from my journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember, it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve.